We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
The presidency of Joe Biden and with him elected Democrats across the nation appear to be enthralled to a progressive new method of spending taxpayer funds. This is Bidenomics. What are the tenets of this ideology, the pitfalls, and are there any advantages from an economic standpoint? Well, we're joined by economist and author Andrew Moran to pass the facts from the spin. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
So, Andrew, it seems that inflation is easing somewhat and gas prices are stabilizing, albeit at twice what they were when Biden took office. So stabilizing high, let's say. Isn't this due to Biden's economic policies?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you look at if you use gas prices as an example, the White House came out with a fact sheet a few months ago that said that depleting the strategic petroleum reserves by 40% only saved American taxpayers up to 40 cents at the gas pump. So not necessarily. When it comes to inflation, again, not because of Bidenomics. The Inflation Reduction Act only became effective January 1st. A lot of things aren't even going to happen until the IRS issues its approval. Mostly the inflation coming down is due to a couple of things. The Federal Reserve raising interest rates, that's traveling through the system, and two, killing demand for a lot of goods and services that were contributing to inflation. So no, overall, I mean, you and I discussed this before. I mean, I can't really blame Biden for taking credit for inflation coming down. He was primarily blamed for inflation going up, even though it was a multitude of factors like the Federal Reserve and the American Rescue Plan, all those things.
Yeah, you kind of really can't take the credit for bringing inflation down and bringing gas prices down unless you take the blame for pushing them up through your policies in the first place. So can you define Bidenomics for me?
Well, I guess one doctrine, as I recently wrote on Liberty Nation, was reward work, not wealth. I think that's one tenet of Bidenomics. Another one is probably only the government can intervene and save the economy. The government is your master. The government is the best investor in the economy. So perhaps all those tenets can define the Biden economic doctrine.
Well, let's talk about reward work, not wealth. Now, you wrote an article on this for Liberty Nation very recently, and how the Biden administration plans to reward one, but not the other. I'm sure you can guess which one. Now, this strikes me as a troublesome way to look at things. What's your analysis?
Yeah, I've heard this phrase many times over the last couple of years. I don't know why I didn't touch upon it before, but so I recently did. And it's frustrating because they go hand in hand. When you work and you work hard enough and you build your human capital, you develop wealth. But work happens because of wealth. If I'm a wealthy person, I'll invest in a factory. I'll invest in a new company. I'll invest in hiring people. And that, of course, will produce work. I mean, this whole idea, I guess it comes from the idea that the government is the true provider of wealth generation. By thinking that you can just dig ditches and that's going to create wealth and that's real work. But it's a Marxian idea, or perhaps even as I said in my article, that it's a Care Bears economics, whereby yay, we're all being celebrated for work, but those evil billionaires are going to be penalized through the tool of the state. But it's nonsense. Billionaires provide the work, and people who work can accumulate wealth. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, it seems that there's a bit of a disconnect between the understanding that what you have is you work, and then through your work you create wealth, and in an ideal world that wealth will then create more wealth for you. That there used to be a saying that I'm sure has not been uttered through anybody's lips for a good 50 years or so, but when you're in your 20s you make your money with your hands, when you're in your 30s make money with your money.
Yeah, I agree. But what's funny too about this is that what's the one entity that destroys wealth and actually has proven the last couple of years to destroy work? It's the government. I'm
not sure, but does it live in a particularly large pale house in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
It's true, and the Federal Reserve too. I mean, you can say also the Eccles Building is the chief destroyer of wealth through its, through the inflation tax, destroying your purchasing power, and then work has been deterred too, because the last couple of years when Bidenomics, or President Biden, when he sweetened the unemployment benefits, that deterred a lot of people from going back to work. You still have this labor shortage going on today. So the government has actually penalized both work and wealth. So I find that comical when you start diving deeper into it.
Well, at least they're doing it fairly, right? Penalizing everybody across the board. Now, doesn't this just encourage people not to save, though? And eventually, won't that, and I'm not sure if I'm phrasing this right, but create a society where living paycheck to paycheck becomes the done thing? Now, I know a lot of people do that anyway, but it's not a situation that anybody really wants to be in. But if we're penalizing wealth, isn't that what's going to happen?
Well, I mean, look at the data. I mean, people are hardly saving as it is now. The last numbers, I think, from the Bureau of Economic Analysis was 2.9%, and that's historically low. That's even lower than it was, freaking 25 years ago. It's mind-numbing to me how little people are saving. But I always think of a great There was I think it's either in the Free to Choose book or in this Free to Choose documentary where Milton Friedman was discussing how you can't really fault people for not saving due to two things: one, inflation; two, artificially low interest rates. Because if I deposit my $500 or $1,000 into the bank, I get pennies on the dollar. I get a few pennies a month in interest. Why would I want to save that money when I could just go out, protect the wealth, the capital I have now, you take advantage of the purchasing power now and just buy stuff? I think that's actually part of the time preference theory. I
think what you mean by the time preference theory there, just for our listeners, is that the idea that, for example, with inflation running at, say, 5%, just for example, if you buy $1,000 worth of goods now rather than saving it and earning, let's say, $1 over the period of a year, you'll actually be saving 4%, because if you buy that same thing next year, it will actually cost more because of the inflationary measure. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Hey, I have learned something by paying attention to
if you buy those Funko Pop dolls, that's an appreciating asset too.
All right, Andrew, there's another topic I want to talk about. It's slightly off Bidenomics, but perhaps it does tie in somewhat. Now, there's a lot of talk about redoing the whole tax system, and there's people talking about the Fair Tax Act, and there's people in Washington talking about getting rid of income tax entirely and then just having a sales tax. Tell me the details.
So the House Republicans recently proposed legislation to get rid of pretty much all federal taxes: gift taxes, income taxes, state taxes, payroll taxes. And in its favor, they want to impose a 23 to 30% national sales tax. Now, on the one hand, I mean, and the Biden administration, Democrats are just, they're focusing mainly on how Republicans want to raise the sales tax and get rid of the income tax.
Sorry to interrupt, Andrew. I have seen that a lot on the social media with notable Democrats, high-ranking Democrats, saying they want to increase they want to put a 30% tax on you without mentioning, and not a single one of them mentions, whilst removing your income tax.
And what's funny too is how they analyze the situation. So they're saying, "Oh, the Republicans, they want to get rid of the income tax and raise impose a national sales tax because they want to help the wealthy." But there's two things about that. If I'm a billionaire, I'm not earning my money through getting a steady paycheck. I'm earning my money through investment and stock and equity and all that stuff. And two, the rich are the ones who would pay more of the national sales tax because they're the ones who are buying the yachts, they want to buy the boat, the expensive mansions, all those things. So that's mind-numbing to me. But at the same time, I'm against a national sales tax because, as Murray Rothbard said, that's a tax on living. If I want to go out and buy a loaf of bread or rent an apartment, whatever the case, I'm taxed for that. So I'm taxed from going in my day-to-day life. But at the same time, I'm clearly in favor of abolishing income tax, abolishing estate taxes, gift taxes, all those things. I mean, though that's a completely beneficial idea. But a sales tax, no.
So Andrew, let's rate Bidenomics here. Does it get an A+, an A-, an F-, a Z?
And pretty much any economic doctrine that depends on government gets an F for me. There's been really anything good coming out of this administration economics wise. So yeah, I have to give it an F. Sorry, President Biden.
That's an F from Andrew Moran, and we're talking with Andrew on the tenets of Bidenomics. Up next after this short break, we're talking liberty with Scott D. Cosenza, and there's no end in sight for the troubles for Christian bakers. Don't touch that dial. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative Five. produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone, hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner, joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors, deconstructing leftist narratives, debating the hot topics, and remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.